Type Soul is still gonna die. In my opinion, a new development team really doesn't change much, because the biggest positive changes they've made are removals of content nobody liked, which does make the game more enjoyable. And while yes, the progression is better with the lack of things like boss raids, and no longer needing to have true modes to be on par with people who have them, and of course no more true modes which were super unbalanced, the game is in a healthier spot than it was during the Hellverse update. But that doesn't mean that it's great or that it's going to survive for any longer than it did the other times when it had major updates, even with the change in leadership. Anyway, I'll be live at twitch.tv/Reaconteur ranking your drip about 20 minutes after this video goes up, so check me out over there when you're done watching this video, and let's get straight into it. Alright, so Type Soul is back for the 4th time already, and it's just getting insane. I cannot believe how much hype this game can still pull by just shutting down when nobody's playing it and then re-releasing it. Ironically, with less content than the game had before, and what I think is the least thoughtful skill tree in the entire game, where its whole gimmick is having alt versions of its moves that are basically just better. But realistically, I don't see the game lasting any longer this time, because Type Soul's biggest issues, which inevitably kill the game every time, are the lack of new universal content and the lack of consistent updates that are actually good. And also, everyone hates Hakuda except Hakuda users, and I think Hakuda right now is probably the strongest it's been since the original release. It's so stupid, right? Then the devs shut down the game, right? And then they hype it up for a re-release, and then they drop a major update made to change the game, and everyone comes back because the combat is at least kind of fun, but nothing really changes. And every time they release a new update, there's some super dumbass addition to the game that's hard to get and somewhat gatekept by testers. Originally, it was Bankai and modes back when they were actually hard to get, but then, similarly to actual Bleach, every bum you see got a Bankai and it became super easy. And then they released the game the second time with boss raids, which sucked, and they were trying to turn it into a more PvE focused game because they thought that that would keep it alive, because, you know, Deep Woken is all of its biggest updates are PvE focused, so why don't we copy Deep Woken? Well, because this game isn't made for PvE. And then they released the game again with Hell and True modes, and now they're back with the Almighty, which takes the place of the game's current stupid CC difficulty level quest. But it's worse now, because it's exclusive to Quincy's, and the only two people with the Almighty right now just happen to be testers and friends of Christie. But in my experience, the devs just leak everything to testers anyway, which is super lame, but to be expected. Type Soul just isn't the type of game that lasts, and it's always the fault of the leadership. And it's harder when the game is meant to be based on something, because Type Soul is based on Bleach. It means that the content they can add to the game is finite as far as actual Bleach additions go. And then everything outside of actual Bleach is far off from what is actually in the Bleach universe, and then it ends up coming off as jarring when they have Broly and stuff like that, which is really funny because Cetro, back when he was the owner, actually fucked everything up. Video remains PG-13, that's my first F word, I get 2 per video, because he was trying to make the Hellverse update based on unconfirmed Bleach leaks about an arc that hasn't even came out yet. Meanwhile, the entire time, the update he planned after the Hell update was supposed to be the 1000-Year Blood War update, which is already a thing in Bleach. There's so much source material to take off of, so why are we updating the game backwards? And then Hell was also just a terrible update full of non-canon content that made no sense. Like, yeah, to enter Hell, you need to fight the Gatekeeper, who's an Evangelion boss. Then you need to do a whole puzzle inspired by, I don't even remember, Squid Game. And then Hell itself is full of rock golem creatures from Zelda Breath of the Wild. He made an entire update about a Bleach arc that never came out. And then he made an entire bunch of additions to the game that never made sense, which were references to random stuff he liked, instead of at least finishing the in-game content that could be added with all the missing stuff in Bleach that isn't even in the game today. He was like, yeah, let's add Broly, Devil May Cry, and all this other random stuff to the game, when there's so much more Bleach stuff that could be added. But then you remember, the reason was because Cetro never actually watched Bleach. I know, I'm sure not all of you watching this knew that. Cetro never watched or read Bleach. His knowledge from it came from TikTok and the community and the Type Soul Discord. And yeah, the new game ownership and such, it probably comes with better leadership, but with the same development team, I doubt there's enough creative direction to keep this game going consistently with universal content, or even enough faction-based content for every faction to keep the game fresh and fun for longer than another month or 2 at most. Because yeah, they can keep adding elements and Shikais and Bankais and resurrections and all of that, but does it really matter? Because all that's gonna happen is they're gonna keep adding these resurrections and these new modes, and people are either gonna like them and use them, doesn't really change much about the game, doesn't add anything to progress towards, or people aren't going to like them and they aren't going to use them, and then you might as well have not added it. But then again, people only use stuff that's overpowered anyway, so they don't care if it's their favorite character. It's honestly just just boring to see the same game coming back and getting hyped, and it's almost pathetic for the community's sake. This is like when the Sorcery devs came back 3 times in a row and exit scammed the community by the same guy on Discord alts. And by the way, they're doing it again. And off topic, very off topic, but what I hate about that game is that this time there's genuinely people defending it by saying, but Sorcery's free this time, so how's he gonna exit scam? Don't play the fucking game that he exit scammed 3 times in a row. That piece of trash developer deserves to make no money off of that game, okay? He's still gonna make money because he's still getting players on his game, they're still gonna buy game passes and stuff like that. I don't care if the game is free, nobody should be playing it. And while Type Soul isn't nearly as bad as Sorcery, it's still effectively the same loop and process they go through consistently and have gone through like 4 times already. It's better than scamming your entire community multiple times, but it's still lame, and it really shows how incompetent your team is to not be able to uphold this game's player count consistently. Your game peaked at over 110,000 players, and somehow you let your player counts drop below 100 multiple times? How? Single player games that have no PvP content on Roblox or replayability that were made years ago average more than 100 players today, but your super hyped up PvP focused game that's, you know, based around its community can't manage to keep 100 players? That's just pathetic. How bad is the leadership over on the Type Soul development team for this to be going on? And in fact, I would know how bad the leadership is because I was on the original balancing team when they first made a balancing team, and they didn't fucking listen to anyone, or at least like they listened to the absolute morons that were on the balancing team, because the balancing team back then consisted of basically just all top ranked players and then a few YouTubers. So I think I was probably the only person in that entire Discord that actively talked in there that knew what they were talking about, because every time a top 20 player would chime in and they'd be like, but this is broken and that's broken, so nerf it this way. And it's just the worst change I've ever heard in my entire life. And I understand that just because you're good at a game doesn't mean that you're good at game design and you understand how things should be going. But here's an example. The Great Cannon, right? Nosrep said, the counter to Great Cannon is parrying it, by the way. If you think otherwise, DM these 2 people, whatever, just being like snarky, annoying response, because people were asking him to nerf the Great Cannon. But the problem with making something like the Great Cannon, where the only way to really counter it is by parrying it, is first of all, this is a movement-based game. It's not easy to parry things in this game. The windows are tight and they did that on purpose. I get that, right? But the big problem is you're making something that's supposed to be only countered by parrying when it can't be done super consistently by most people, or even like all people, right? But then in ganks, it is completely unbalanced because there's so many ways to confirm hits on people in ganks. So then you have things like Great Cannon, which just dominate ganks because, hey, I'm behind you, there's no way you're gonna parry this, so I'm just gonna use my Great Cannon. Or, hey, my teammate's stun locking you with another move, so I'm gonna use this because there's no way you're gonna parry my Great Cannon. That is poor balancing. And people would say, oh, just nerf it into the ground, and then it would eventually be garbage, but that's not how you balance things. And the balancing team back then was just as pathetic and didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. Oh man, that's 3 F words. This video is PG-13. God damn it, this video is barely over PG-13 now, but I think YouTube will let it slide. And it's stupid, bro. And the dev team is pretty much the exact same as the balancing team from what I've seen, or at least the people who work on balancing now are, because they are just not very competent. They kind of just nerf things into the ground when it's too strong, and then that thing never gets touched again, and then they eventually buff it or rework it later, and then it ends up too strong again. Like, why can't we just have things be appropriately balanced? And your game can still build hype. It can even bring in new players, but the average person is only playing it because of the hype, which is why most people don't get far, and those who do get far and play the game again every update and keep coming back and back don't even get far enough, like, as far as like longevity goes. So the game keeps dying in a few months. And it doesn't make sense how you can pull players this easily, and yet you can't keep any percentage of them to the point where you guys are actually capable of losing 100% of your player base. Which is kind of funny, but to my knowledge, most people playing Type Soul are only playing it because there are no other Bleach games on Roblox right now. So it seems like most people are just waiting on VV Ultimatum, which by the way I will be doing a video on next week probably. But also Bleach games as a whole have never had longevity on Roblox, or maybe it's just a problem with anime games and anime slop on Roblox as a whole. The only relevant games on Roblox like that are GPO, which is GPO. I don't think much needs to be said about that trash. And then right now, Anime Vanguard and some other One Piece game, I forgot the name of, Sailor Piece I think it is. 2 of those 3 games have nothing to do with anything in them specifically, and kind of just slop random garbage together with anime branding. Anime Vanguard is literally just a tower defense that they threw anime characters on top of. So it's infinitely replayable and infinitely easily updatable because it's a tower defense game, so it has pretty long longevity. Then you have Sailor Piece, which has nothing to do with One Piece when, I don't know, isn't Gojo a boss in that game? And I have a friend who's like level 13,000. I've never played it, but I've seen like clips of it. And it's just like random slop thrown together. And anime games in general on Roblox are kind of limited. You either add random stuff people probably won't like, after running out of canon content that you have a finite amount of, or you put in random garbage from the very beginning and your game isn't primarily themed around just one source of media. The first option results in anime games that are usually mostly geared towards slightly older audiences and prioritize gameplay and progression experience to an extent. Not that progression's ever good. Look at Sorcery, look at Type Soul, look at Blotch, if you guys remember Blotch 2, versus the second option, which makes Roblox games geared towards children but makes more money and have much more potential for future updates, longer longevity. Think about every past Bleach or anime game you know. It's probably dead by now. Anime slop on Roblox just doesn't have longevity if it's only based on one anime, and that's how it always is. The only things with longevity are those with originality. Projects that can be added onto indefinitely, like Deep Woken and Rogue Lineage, with original, unique combat systems people like. Meanwhile, anime games like Type Soul don't have permanently addable content unless you write your own lore. And yeah, Type Soul and Cetra tried to do that, but it didn't go super well last time. Now did it? Because the Hell update was a huge, fat failure, and now it's not even in the game anymore. You guys spent a year working on it, made your money off of it, and now it's been removed from the game entirely, and everything from that update was just scrapped completely. That's worse than Deep Woken's Conquest. But whatever, dude. I wouldn't be surprised if Cetra still like got some sort of development ties and has stuff to do with the game. I mean, some people don't care, some people do care. I just know he still has his specs and stuff, and people have seen him with specs, and he definitely has like mod menu still, because I think there's a clip of him using God mode while like in a 1v1 match, and he had to disable it before the fight started. Regardless, I think Type Soul is gonna die again. I'll play it while it's here, but I won't expect it to last long. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed as usual. If you guys have any thoughts, leave them down in the comments section below. I read them all. Shoutouts to YouTube members of Tier 2 or higher: Green, Philip, Delusional Mo, Broccoli, Akio Sugekuni, Zerksky, Unigio, Fun Guns, Abridged Gouther, Drizzy Drake Fan, and welcome to new Tier 2 member Cap1913. I love you, Cap. Anyway, new song cover this week / weekend / within the week, so, you know, buy any YouTube membership tier to listen to my monthly song covers. Hope you all enjoyed. I love you all as usual, and goodbye.